A couple classes ago, you all received this worksheet, which is where we reviewed some Algebra 1 topics. I need this video to be paused so you guys can get this piece of paper out on your desk along with 2 highlighters. So you had to put this in your notes section, so hopefully you found it. So go ahead and pause this video until you find it, and then we can keep going. A couple classes ago, we talked about simplifying polynomials, where on these problems down here, we were going to have to double distribute to get our answer. Or on a problem like number 6, I was going to have to scribble this out, and I was going to have to rewrite 3x plus 1, and then I was going to have to double distribute, right? Then we started talking about factoring, and when we factor, we have to first ask ourselves if there's a GCF, and then we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, am I going to factor quickly, or am I going to do the slide and divide method? So I'm going to put an example up here, and I want you to write this example somewhere on your paper. So I have 2x squared plus 5x plus 3. So I want this problem factored. So first question you can ask yourself, is there a GCF? Is there a common factor between 2x squared, 5x, and 3? No. Okay, so now you have to ask yourself, well, fine. Am I going to factor quickly, or do I have to do slide and divide? Well, I'm going to have to do slide and divide. How do I know I have to do slide and divide on a problem like this? Because I have a number in front of my x squared. So I'm going to circle that number and slide it to the back. I get 6. I now need factors of 6 that add up to 5. So factors of 6, 6 and 1. 6 and negative 1 make 5, but 6 times negative 1 does not make positive 6, so that's not an option. How about 3 and 2? 3 and 2 multiply up to get 6. 3 and 2 add up to get 5. I'm done. So x plus 3 times x plus 2. So I'm finished? Nope. I got to take this number that I slided with and I got to divide everybody by it. So now I clean it up. 3 over 2. Can I simplify it? Nope. Slide it up next to x, so 2x plus 3. 2 over 2. Can I simplify? Yep. To 1. And this is how I factor. So I want you to go ahead and flip this paper. So we have to talk about solving quadratic equations. So if you could go ahead and highlight where it says, solving quadratic equations. Before we do this, solving a quadratic equation is just an equation with a squared. So before we go ahead and do this, I want to write this problem down. 2x squared plus 4x equals 18. No. Let's do, I'm thinking about this on the top of my head, 12. This is a quadratic equation because x is squared. So let's review. I want to get x by itself. So I'm going to do, what am I going to do first? Well, I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides. So I have 2x squared equals 8. So now what am I going to do to get x by itself? I'm going to divide by 2. So I have x squared equals 4. So now, how do I undo square root? Squares, I square root. So x equals 2. And I'm done. But what happens when I have a problem like this? X squared plus 3x plus 2 equals 0. So I got to get x by itself. So I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides. So I have x squared plus 3x equals negative 2. Can I combine x squared with 3x? No. I can't combine these because this one has an exponent and this one doesn't. So I'm never going to be able to get x by itself in a problem like this because I'm not going to be able to combine these. So my question is, well, what do I do when I have an x squared and an x in an equation? Well, I'm going to have to factor. So, how do I solve a quadratic equation? Step 1, set equation equal to 0. Step 2, factor. How do I factor? Just like the other side. Ask yourself, do I have a GCF? If yes, take it out. If no, factor. If you can factor, you have to ask yourself if you're going to factor quickly or if you're going to factor with slide and divide. Step 3, split up factors to solve for x. So, let's go ahead and look at this first question. Looking at number 1, how do I know just by looking at it I have to factor? Well, I know I'm going to have to factor because I have an x squared and I have an x. There's no other way I can get x by itself. My goal is to solve. My goal is to find x. The only way I can do this is to factor. So step 1, set equation equal to 0. That's done. Step 2, factor. So can I factor quickly or do I have to do slide and divide? Well, I can factor quickly. Because there's nothing in front of this x squared. So I need factors of 8 that add up to negative 6. 4 and 2 make positive 6. So how do I make that negative 6? Negative 4 and negative 2. So x minus 4 and x minus 2. So on the previous page, we stopped here. But because of this equal sign, you have to take this a step further because this equals 0. So, step 3, split up my factors and solve for x. Every time I see a times sign, or there is a times sign in this problem, I'm going to split it up. My times sign is actually right here, because it's 4 minus x times x minus 2. So, I'm going to set these up into two equations. X minus 4 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. So now I'm going to solve. So if I solve for x on the left, what's x equal? It equals 4. If I solve for x on the right, what's x equal? X equals 2. So I have two answers in a problem like this. My two answers are 4 and 2. Let's go over and look at the next one. Number 2. Just by looking at this equation, I know I have to factor. How come? Because I have an x squared and I have an x. Whenever you see an x squared and an x, your brain has to immediately go factor. How do I factor an equation? I have to follow these steps up here. Step 1, set equation equal to 0. It's equal to 0, I'm good to go. Step 2, factor. Can I quickly factor? Well, let's pause. First question, is there a GCF? Nope. Second question, can I factor quickly or do I have to factor with slide and divide? Well, I got to factor with slide and divide. So circle 3, slide to the back, I get 6. So, factors of 6 that make negative 7, negative 6 and negative 1. So x minus 6, x minus 1. So I'm done? Nope. I now have to divide everybody by 3 because that's the number I circled. So simplify. 6 over 3 makes x minus 2. 1 over 3 I can't simplify, so that 3 slides up next to x. You know you're not done because of this equals 0. This equals 0 tells me I have to split up my factors and solve. So I always split up my factors whenever there's a times sign. So split it up, set up my equations. X minus 2 equals 0, and 3x minus 1 equals 0. So on my left side, what's x equal? 2. On my right side, I got to add 1 to the other side, and then I got to divide by 3. So x equals 1 over 3 and 2. You with me? Let's look at the next one. Number 3. Just by looking at number 3, how do I know I have to factor this? Well, because I have an x squared and an x. So I got to follow my steps. Step 1, set my equation equal to 0. So piece of advice. Whenever you're setting an equation equal to 0, x squared should always be positive. You might want to write that down somewhere. X squared should always be positive. So you're never going to want to subtract x squared on the other side. You're always going to want to keep them positive. So how am I going to make this equal 0? Well, I got to subtract 4 on both sides. So when you subtract 4 on both sides, where does negative 4 go? First, middle, or last? Well, it goes in the middle. So x squared minus 3x minus 4 equals 0. So step 1, set equation equal to 0. Step 2, factor. First question you should ask yourself, is there a GCF? No. Can I factor quickly or do I have to do slide and divide? Oh, I can factor quickly because I have no number in front of x squared. Factors of -4 that add up to -3. -4 and +1. Notice I didn't even write anything off to the side over here. If you can do it completely in your head, that's awesome. I know I'm not done because I have this equals 0. So what do I do with the equals 0? I split up my two parentheses and I say x minus 4 equals 0 and x plus 1 equals 0. So x equals 4 and x equals -1. I hope you're all starting to notice that whatever this is, x minus 4, your answer ends up being the opposite. In parentheses, it's -4, but my final answer is +4. In my parentheses, it's +1, and my answer, it's -1. So let's go ahead and look at this one. So, how do I know I'm going to have to factor this equation? Because I have an x squared and an x. So, first step, make equation equal to 0. So if I subtract x squared, is that okay? No, because x squared can't be negative. It makes your life a nightmare if it is. So instead, I want to subtract 10x and add 25. And I'm going to do that all in one swoop. So x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals 0. So, step 2, factor. First question you ask yourself, is there a GCF? No. All right, so factor with slide and divide or factor quickly? I can factor quickly. Factors of 25 that add up to -10. -5 and -5. That equals 0. So, because I have an equal sign, split it up. X minus 5 equals 0. X minus 5 equals 0. So, x equals 5 and x equals 5. Is it necessary to repeat? No. So I just would say x equals 5. So I want everybody to attempt number 6. So I want you to solve number 6. So go ahead and pause this video and let's... Actually, I lied. I don't want you to do number 6. I want you to do number 7. So if you could pause this video and solve number 7 and then unpause it and then we'll go over it. Number 7, how do I know I have to factor it? Because I have an x squared and an x. So first question you ask yourself, is there a GCF? No. So, can I factor quickly or slide and divide? Slide and divide. Factors of 8 that make 7. Well, 8 and -1 would make 7, but that would be a positive 8, right? So this doesn't work. So eventually we're going to come back and we're going to talk about it. So we would always write unfactorable if it didn't work. So for today, we're just going to write as unsolvable. And then at another time, we'll come back to talk about what happens if we can't factor it, what we should do. So now let's attempt number 8. Go ahead and pause this video and let's try number 8. How do I know I'm going to have to factor number 8? I have an x squared and an x. So I'm going to make this equation equal 0 by adding 2x to both sides. So I have x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. So now I got to factor. I can factor quickly because I have no coefficient in front of x squared. Factors of -8 that add up to 2. +4 and -2. How do I know I'm not done? Because I have an equal sign, so split it up. So over on my left, what's x going to equal? -4. And x equals 2. So today, on this next notes page, we're going to talk about how we're going to use this involving circles.